Time and space, these are two extremes in between which lie the human being, because most of the time for space, it's more or less like being very much available really. But for time, most people complain that time is more or less short, and feel as if 24 hours is very much less in a day. If need be, they won't have more. And that's the bad news, you can have more than 24 hours. But the good news is, whatever that happens to time, no matter how fast it speeds, you are the pilot. You decide on, what you really want to do with it, which aspect you want to value, and how you really want to work out with it. Welcome to Reflections. My name is Elaigwu, and this week we shall be looking at these two extremes and how our personality fit into them and try to make a mark in life. My personality is 73 years old. Of course, he said he's 73 years younger, not older. He's a Professor Emeritus, Jonah Isawa Elaigwu. Welcome to Reflections, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were saying you're not 73 years old, but 73 years younger. You didn't say younger anyway, but young. How do you mean?
Well, that's in gratitude to God that He creates and He gives. And of course takes at His convenience. It's all acceptable. I say young because from what you just said in time, you see, there's trinity of time: the past, the present, and the future. The past lays the foundation for the present, and the present lays the foundation for the future and your aspirations. As you get older physically, you look at the past, you review some of the things you've done, you wonder how stupid you were. How could I have done that? I'm sure it happens to you at any age.
Yeah, sure.
And you do something and say, I did that. On the other hand, as you look forward to the future, you keep learning. Because the whole of life is a learning process. As a student of life, I'm always young, not old.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations for growing younger.
Thank you.
Prof, you've retired. I think you've retired at 2 levels now, I think.
Yeah.
From public service and of course from where you are at the moment, because when we came in, we found some reorganizations taking place here. And when I asked, you said you're finally bowing out of this.
Well, I retired from the public service as a professor about 51, 1999. Ideally, I had up to 70 to stay, but I thought I should make myself more functional elsewhere while doing my academic work. I still do in fact, I published more works after I left the university than when I was there. Then, of course, I continued establishing this place. I've done a number of things. Most have heard of the annual distinguished lectures, which brought many people here. Shagari, Babangida, Shonekam, at different times to give, and Nuyoma of Namibia, to give lectures. Then we have trained public services from Nasarawa and the legislature too, Plateau, Bauchi, Taraba, and the National Assembly. So, in addition to that, we do research. You will see some of our research works Some of them have been published, others are ongoing. And we're looking at patterns of conflict in Nigeria, the subbook, which is partly reflected in my 2013 lectures, which is in a book to Radio Nigeria.
But you don't look really, I don't want to use the word target, you don't look really one as you say you want to live where you're still strong. You know, go home, if I may use the word, go home and rest. You know, most people like you have really spent most of their lives, you know, working and working, writing and doing things like that. They'll find it really boring to really go home if it's really getting back home.
Well, like you say, between the two extremes of time, there is a point in which you engage, and there is a point at which you disengage. And it's very difficult to know what time is appropriate for those actions. But for me, it's time for me to stay at home. My library has been refurbished, reworked, and I work at home in my library. So living here does not mean I have stopped. It only means that all this while I here, they can keep and work on it, while I can now concentrate on doing my own thing at my own time.
Now let's look at your, your stronger days, your, days when you're really strong and then doing it fully to your capacity. Let's get back to 1986. 1986, and then see when you were a member of the Presidential Advisory Committee, you were in the IBB days, and then that is when, the head of state then went to the IBB tour, and then got to people like you, got tap all the resources available, and then led the team.
One thing I would respect Babangida for is that he had the courage to listen. Many leaders don't listen, they talk. And you listen, even though you're supposed to be advising them. He had the courage to listen. And also, he was not expecting you to flatter him. He's still alive, and he can tell you that some of us told him things that some other heads of state would have slapped you or sacked you the next minute. The man would laugh. Even if he disagreed with you, he would engage you in arguments. So he was the type of a leader who enjoyed discussions, conversation, and didn't believe that taking actions on policies without interactions with others was useful. Now, was it useful? Under a military regime, it took a different turn, in the sense that it was useful. It provided the PHC and others the contact with the populace, which the military didn't have. Feeling the pulse, feeding back, telling them that this is not right. People have the IMF loan, for example, and many other things. So I think it was useful. Secondly, a lot of projects were carried out on the Babangida regime. People would turn around now and dissociate themselves and even lie, but the facts are there. For example, look at Abuja, how it developed on there. Look at the People's Bank, for example, even though it collapsed later. Look at many programs that he established, different, using the oil resources to open up the rural areas. Look at the the educational sector, how it expanded, and many parastatals which he established are still functioning today. So the input of new ideas was useful, but the complexity of the Nigerian setting is such that with all the goodwill in the world, especially under a military regime, you don't have predictability of events and action. So the facts will be on your table. You may want to take actions on them, then something suddenly happens. Like April 1990, and changes the whole gear. So if you were going on gear 4, you have to reduce it to gear 2 with higher traction because you have to survive. And so priorities change. And that does not mean that it was not useful. It's just that the environmental determinants of action had changed and had impact on inputs that he had on the table and was working on. Particularly 92, 93 was such a busy period that all the things he had to do before leaving were gone. Couldn't even do them. So when people say June 12th, I laugh. The same people said Gowon did nothing for 9 years. Then later on turned around and said, but the roads, the airports you have now, most of them were done by Gowon. And then, the level of emotional white male, if you may, because I'm black, that we have in Nigeria from the populace is very, very deceptive. So leaders find themselves caught between what they may regard as the demands of populism and the demands for principled leadership in decision making. More than any leader since Gowon, because Gowon did bring people close into government from all sections of the country. I think Babangida was the most expansive in his recruitment policy and involvement of people in governance.
When we look at the political development in this country, one thing stands out that the people always talk about, and that's the truncation of democracy during Babangida's regime. And that was the June 12th issue.
Now, June 12th was a product of political and military complexities that many Nigerians don't understand. Now, I keep asking myself, from what some of us have known, from what people have written, from statements made by Babangida and others, like Omori, Babangida and others, and other military officers one has talked to. Would Abiola have been able to remain as head of state if he was taken
as president?
Because within the military, there was a big fraction. And among themselves, I think they would have either killed Babangida, like Omori said, and his team, or military supporters, or something else. Now, that's one side of the story. The other side of the story, okay, why don't you allow it happen so that it can unfold? Fine, you allow it happen, it unfolds. Two possibilities. It could lead to greater stability or greater level of instability. An outburst which you wouldn't be able to control, or a more equable political climate, if you want, that makes democracy take roots in Nigeria. So it's a question of looking at the system and saying, if this had happened, my question and my appeal to Nigerians, when you want to speculate, always ask yourself, if this had happened, it had not happened, what were the factors that made it not to happen? Did you ask yourself what the consequences would have been if the factors on the ground had happened one way or the other? So I'm more skeptical about passing judgment. That's why I'm saying not bad or good.
I can see your caution there.
Yeah.
But that will not stop us from further asking you if it had happened, all right, if it had not happened. These are all possibilities and positions that could have been taken.
Well, I'm not a political prophet, and I don't want to be a prophet because God hasn't given me that talent.
Okay.
But all I know is that if you're looking at possible scenarios, one scenario is this: Abiola takes over, he, Babangida, and others are killed. There's upheaval. Some people in the army take over, massacre others. Okay, that's one scenario. The second scenario is that you put Abiola in power, and he's blackmailed or whitemailed by the military, and is inept and can't do anything for obvious structure of the military that put him there. He'll be a compromise candidate that wouldn't have much to do or couldn't do much because they had to be dictated. The third thing is an outburst.
Okay.
Like I said in scenario one, and that would create further aggravation of the political instability in the system.
Okay.
So those are scenarios. So when you look at if it had happened,
right,
these scenarios are also possible.
They are possible, sure.
And then the final one could be that Abiola, using his contacts and other things, contacts and public relations, would calm the system, establish a civilian democratic structure, and then lead to the next election and provide the basis for an enduring democratic polity. Those are 4 scenarios.
And anyone could be, could have been.
Remember.
Well, let's look at the military, civil military relations now. A lot of people argue that Nigeria's, democratic journey have been truncated by the military right from the onset, from the 60s, and there it goes up to the last time we had. And that was a point at which we missed the track, according to them. That's missing the track in the sense of having, not really having democracy smoothly implemented and then, development following suit. Do you see the military as, culpable in this? Or are they just thinking that these are excuses that could be taken?
Those arguments were there in the 70s and some of us have been very cautious because it is not true that democracy precedes development. In fact, economic development takes is better or more easily undertaken under military regimes, like Singapore, for example. Or, under generally military regimes, because you don't have a legislature that will keep arguing and keeping you don't have all the constraints in the democratic setting. You have a military dictator who just rams things through. So, in terms of speed and what have you, many military regimes have done well. Some, of course, have failed for a number of reasons. Now, having said that, the military in Nigeria has been part of the problem and part of the solution.
Okay.
The military in Nigeria took over in '66 as the system became worse and worse as we galloped towards the precipice. The military took over the system. Note what the situation was by 64, 65. Operation Wedge in the West, the violence in Kano, in Benue, not current Benue, or old Benue province and so on, and in the Niger Delta. Then there was secession. After secession, the military then undergone centralized the polity, made it quote unquote one military federal system again. Federal being used advisedly under military. Okay. And then we could now talk of one united Nigeria, united being used advisedly because the process of nation building is still going on. So the military, when we got into crisis, has bailed us from disintegration. Has been part of the solution. But after that, the military itself, that came in as political physicians, became political patients, requiring desirable medicinal dosage, which they came in to offer to civilians.
Okay.
So they imploded with cavalier abandon into the political arena, with gross promiscuity, as you would say, of sex, without caring. So the military itself became not only a political contestant, but a dominant political actor that determined the pace of the political process.
Okay.
I must confess that after the Civil War, a number of things on rehabilitation, roads, airports, and other things were carried out. If we had continued, maybe our development process would have gone on, democracy would have suffered. But military after military after military interrupting the military, checkered their own process of development, which they announced. If it is corruption, they became as corrupt as politicians, even more than politicians of the First Republic. Okay. So, when you now have the setting in which we have, which again was at a point when the military had become problematic to itself and had to leave the scene. Ask yourself today, are the politicians we have now repeating the same mistakes of 1983 and 1964? Is the military option the only solution? Can't we find other solutions to it? Politicians are not listening to their people. You elect a legislator, you don't see him again until 4 years' time, or 3.5, when he's going to contest for election. The man left you with a Smoky Joe 504, if he had one. He's coming with SUVs. Demonstration that politics is a career where you amass wealth. And therefore the stakes are higher in politics. And when the stakes are higher, the process of contestation is tighter, keener, and the instruments of usage in the process of contestation can be anything. It's part of the violence we're having. It's part of it. Politicians give young boys money to go and buy drugs. All the young calories, Echo Mug, and all those other groups, or this other group in Rivers, about 2003. They became warlords to the point that the politicians who hired them became afraid of them.
So even targets.
Exactly. So once you create a situation which makes the atmosphere in the political stadium dangerous for your opponent, you are making it dangerous for yourself. Because those who work for you today are not tied to you. They work to the opponent and face you. Secondly, when the atmosphere in the political stadium is adulterated, what you also have is a situation in which nobody can breathe good air, fresh air. So the political stadiums become dangerous for everybody. And finally, when politicians close the door when they get into the office, arrogantly close the door, they are not gracious victors. So they do not expect gallant losers around. They expect that door to be broken before others can enter. Whereas if they are gracious victors through election, the door will be open, others can come in and go. So politicians generate the instruments or generate the environment for violence.
And that's generally what we may be having on hands right now.
I think much of what we are having is also partly politician derived. I think also that if politicians can tell themselves the truth, if they can sit down and say, let's not play politics with security. Because you and I are supposed to be security agents for our country. We're all security people. We don't wear uniform, but every citizen of a country is a member of the security team. Because when there's violence hitting the next door neighbor, are you sure it won't hit your own tomorrow?
No. You're watching Reflections. We're reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. And this week, my personality is Professor Emeritus Jonah Elaigwu, and he's a professor of political science. We've been talking over there for the past 30 minutes, and we'll keep talking for the next 20 or so minutes, so we come back from this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Prof, let's pick up from where we stopped, talking about security and insecurity in Nigeria.
I think the first thing is to tell ourselves the truth. Many Nigerian political leaders are hypocrites. Say one thing in private, do another in public. Two, they don't even know that security matters cannot be easily politicized. Because once you politicize them, it gets worse and worse and worse. So when people criticize the Buhari regime, I always say, yes, I think the Buhari regime has made some mistakes, which they know themselves. Like any other human regime, But also Nigeria is very complex. I remember, was it 2005 or something, the American embassy published something that terrorism was going to take off in Nigeria. And most papers said, no, it's not possible. So, by 2009, what happened? It took off from Borno. Gradually, because we mishandled it, enlarged. People thought the young people thought they could create a religious warfare, attacking Christian schools, attacking this. And it didn't happen. Then they turned around and attacked Muslims, killing many of them, including harassing emirs and bombarding their palaces. Okay? Now, why were people not honest enough to tell themselves, we can see these things happening? It's going to take place and we are going to be victims. Why? Because it has not come to my door. Like Zebruda would say, it has not come to my door. But before it gets to mine, it would have captured many others. And by the time it gets to me, I would have no option but to kill it. Because there will be no instrument to protect me against them, because all other instruments have failed. And I think part of the problem is that we know the value of education. We underplay it. UBE, UPE, then UBE, and so on. And then Jonathan started this now, as I was telling you, on Al-Majiri schools, which I thought was stupid. I said so then that it should have been merged with the formal school so that they grow together. Now go around, the schools are abandoned. Yet the consequences are there. People are not being educated. And given our structure, if you don't have basic Western education, the passport for the modernizing sector of employment is in there. So the army of the unemployed is exploding every day. Even the tertiary systems we have, the primary school, the secondary school, even the teachers in these places, including universities, what quality do they display? The educational system has broken down virtually. A graduate comes to you for employment. He writes a paragraph and you correct most of the lines. Graduates are becoming unemployable in a context when in the 21st century we need them for development. So these people enter the army of the unemployed, and the army of the unemployed display high level of frustration and anger. And very often, violence is the answer. Many of the kidnappers you have are graduates. Even armed robbers at the banks who go to attack banks, some of them are graduates. Then in addition, Nigeria needs to do something about the issues and grievances of various groups in Nigeria. It's a federation, we have to talk. It's negotiation and adjustment. But leaders ignore them until they fester. Then community conflicts start here and there. Herder-farmer conflicts. That's another one. And people feel free to disagree with me here. My attitude is, look, We are talking of 21st century. Those cattle routes we used to have in the northern region have been blocked by the creation of states. They're not there. So why don't we think of ways of dealing with the issue?
What would be the ways, really, in your own opinion?
Well, it may be a bit radical, but let me put it to you. I believe that the best thing is what Kano is doing. Start aggressively on dry season irrigation. Start ranching. Let the cows be on ranches. If they are going to Lagos for sales, put them in a train or put them in trailers, okay? But how does the average person, many of the people who own them are also rich, but that's not the issue. What about the poor man who has cows and has no money for ranching? And this is where I suggest that the federal government should guarantee state governments loans for them to establish ranches or give loans to individual farmers to establish ranches so that it will be easier on them to develop ranches themselves. And then the government will provide infrastructures like basic irrigation systems around. Then secondly, I believe that every ranch conurbation should have a conurbation of vet and water and other medical services so that the vet people can go around and in other words, the state needs to give backing for the development of private enterprise in that area in accordance with the demands of the 21st century, the desertification of the land and population growth. Same thing, shifting cultivation, no. So how do you make the one plot now instead of 4 you had, such that it will become fertile? Government should provide funds for what northern government used to do and the governments in the 12 states used to do, aggressive agri-extension services, seedlings, fertilizers and all that. Help them.
But the federal government is putting effort in that, there's no doubt about it, because there are so many programs on ground.
I have heard of many programs. A typical Nigerian thing, it doesn't reach the people who deserve it. I think that's the main thing. I mean, I'll give you an example. The Ministry for Social Development, Humanitarian Affairs and something was giving 20,000 to women to do whatever as part of this poverty alleviation thing. So it happened in my village and I called 1 or 2 people. I heard you went to Makadi, you got money, and said, it depends on the agent. We paid 10,000 to the agent and we got 10,000. And I said, and many others who are not even on the list didn't reach. And then again, the process gets politicized and all that. And I'm sure it's happening like that all over the country. You who know about the scandals of fertilizers all over the country. So if they can do it well, I think it will work. So I believe that the federal government needs to find out exactly how these services can be delivered properly.
If being asked, how? What should be your response?
Well, I'm not an expert in agri-extension.
I mean, trying to tackle, the Nigerian mentality of trying to cash on every other single opportunity The woman has been assured of 20,000 naira, and you as an agent will take 10,000 naira and get it with you. I mean, it doesn't really make any great sense.
That's what happened with fertilizers, if you remember. Fertilizers were meant to go to people, they didn't go to people. The rich people were buying them off and reselling them. So, much of it also depends on your level of patriotism, my level of patriotism. I think there's too much greed and materialism in the system that I remember when I was a young lecturer, about 75, people used to say 1 million, 2 million, a lot of money. Then I started hearing later, 0.01 billion, 0.02 billion. Then, now we are going to 0.12 trillion. I mean, the level of crash materialism backed by avarice, the wrong ones that you and I give to our children, that you don't have to work. You get the money. Without work, wherever you are, you will crash one day. Then there's nothing to fall back on. It is the work that gives you the ability to sustain yourself. But we are not teaching our children well. That's part still of what telling you cause violence we have. Then the politicians that I told you. Then the lot of arms that came on. That once individuals resort to self-help, it challenges the monopoly of the instruments of governance that is controlled by government. Instrument of violence that is controlled by government. And the greatest power of government is monopoly of the instruments of violence, because it can dispense it legitimately for the good of everybody.
Being an expert per se, an expert in federalism in this country, a political scientist of note, and then the agitations all over the place about restructuring, which has been there for long, constitutional conferences, constitutional amendments, and the rest of them. Are these agitations for restructure legitimate? If they are, what exactly is restructuring? Are we remaking Nigeria? Are we not going back? Are we not, dancing the same tune again since 1975 or 76?
At the first Isawa Elaigwu symposium lectures, it was a symposium in 2018, I asked what restructuring means, because restructuring doesn't mean much to me. My attitude is that in all federations, there are always agitations. The federal system is a compromise among competing and conflicting interests. So for the federal pendulum to move from centrifugal position, where it favors various agitational subgroups, to the center, where there's relative peace, or to centripetal stance towards the center, there needs to be discussion. People may not be angry. People are angry that they are not getting enough resources from revenue system. People are angry that there's little federal presence in their areas. Even IPOB has some good case. They may not be doing it well, but there are people you can still talk to in spite of the techniques which I believe they are using wrongly. And the various groups, there are people who are quarreling over security matters. State governors believe that they have no powers. They are chief security officers without security accoutrements of power. So how can you make me chief security officer. They are killing people, I can't do anything. That's the El-Rufai stance. Don't negotiate, but I don't have power to stop it. Now, in many areas, people say we're not in government, we're excluded. We want to be president this time. And so it is normal in a federal system for this to take place. So I'm not worried about the agitations. The agitation should take place, but government should provide a forum to let people air their opinion rather than saying we're going to break up. And then you can engage in constitutional amendment sequentially. If I may come back a bit here. We have tried 3 or 4 times on some form of constitutional amendments. Mega constitutional amendments. And they have failed. The last minute, it failed. But I think we can do it sequentially because mega constitutional amendments can also result in mega political instability. So one after the other may be better. Secondly, between security and federalism is the important issue I have written about, I've talked about, state police. State police. Why did you say you don't want state police? Like the Buhari panel said when he came to power. But you align clownish outfits like Amotekun, what have you, all the states you have one vigilante or the other they are paying for. The argument for state police is clear. Nigeria, except for Ethiopia, is the only federal system I know that has no state or local police. Nah. Because it's normal. Because take the Northeast. You capture this place today, you leave tomorrow, they come. It's so big. Federal police cannot cope with it. In fact, in such border towns, you also need the presence, apart from state police, of instruments like, organizations like National Guard to support the state police. First, state police will go on with intelligence, which you cannot easily get. They will also help provide some local support. May I will also say, that at the point we find ourselves, the Nigerian Federation may be complex. It may need us to give some powers down to the state level, local level. It may need us to adjust the pendulum slightly in favor of the states, particularly revenue allocation. In areas where federal government shouldn't be, agriculture. They should have a unit. Until 1964, they didn't have a Ministry of Agriculture. So they should have a unit that gives policies. The federal government has nothing to do anything like Ministry of Culture or something like they used to have. That should be state. They can have a policy unit that gives guidelines to the states. So we need to revise the legislative list. Now, when people say restructuring, whether they mean changing the geopolitical system from 8 to 10 to whatever, I don't know. But the problem that Nigeria faces is more than that. It deals with the process of development and of living and of self-sustainability in Nigeria. Goes beyond that. In addition, I think that on security matters, the Buhari government can do a number of things. One, set up declare a state of emergency, which they are talking about now in Nigeria. I'm not sure what it would look like, but declare a state of emergency that enables you to pick up people who are dangerous and who are betraying information, like we heard in Niger, that even one medical doctor was doing that. And once you declare the state of emergency, set up interministerial committee, foreign affairs, defense, internal affairs. Let them meet every week and feed inputs into the National Security Council and so on. Thirdly, establish as a matter of urgency something in form of a national guard, equipped and armed for immediate intervention when it surpasses the strength of the state police. Equip and establish state police by any state that wants it. After all, Northern Nigeria had the Native Authority Police. The West had local police. The East didn't. So not everybody needs it. So, but you need it. So the law should be made by the National Assembly to guide all states and to prevent the excesses that people are worried about. To say we are not right for it, we will never be right for it. Something that was started in the 50s to 66, we are not doing anything and thinking about the future. In addition, I think we have not come to the realization that we are at war, but we are.
What do you want to be remembered for?
Well, first of all, thank God that made me to come. I'm a proud Nigerian. I want to come back here again if there's anything like reincarnation. I have no regret being a Nigerian. We have our weaknesses like others do. Thank God that I have come. I've done my little best, particularly in trying to influence the mind of young people, many of whom are even leaders of this country today. And had the opportunity to also influence the direction of things in my own little way and create an avenue for peace building in this place, in Plateau. So I thank him for that. If I want to be remembered for anything, it is that life has no single purpose beyond peace of mind. And for you to have your peace of mind, you must have your objective. You must see whether you are achieving it or not. Otherwise, even if you are lying down at night, if you have conscience, you won't be at home with yourself. So, thank God for enabling me to do the little things I've done and for giving me my peace of mind.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
A very big thank you to you out there for being part of this program this week. It has been Reflections, and our guest has been Professor Emeritus Professor Elaigwu, Jonah Elaigwu, that is a professor of political science, and of course we had a lot of discussions about so many issues of national interest. Why don't you join us next week on Reflections with another guest? See you then.